Welcome to the Sweat live stream presented by Xfinity. Pick powerful performance and get connected to the most reliable network nationwide. We are here to preview the Week 1 NFL main slate and get you some top DFS picks for the first week of football. Now, since it's Week 1, we're kicking off football season right with multiple millionaire contests here at DraftKings. We have a millionaire on Thursday for the opening showdown, but then on Sunday, we have 2 milli makers for you to enter. Our $2.5 million prize pool contest, and then our huge $5 million prize pool contest, which is just $5 to enter. Both of those contests pay out $1 million to first place and could earn you a ticket to our DraftKings Tournament of Champions live final coming up in January, where you can take another shot at $1 million. So go check them out in the DraftKings lobby now. All right, so let's take a look at the Sunday slate and these 2 massive millionaire contests. We're going to go position by position, starting with quarterback. So here to get us started, our DraftKings contributors, Julian Edlow, Garion Thorne, and Reed Fowler. Guys, there are 4 quarterbacks on the board with a salary of $7K or more. So we got Patrick Mahomes, Kyler Murray, Josh Allen, and Russell Wilson. Jules, are you looking to spend up at QB in Week 1? And if so, which of these guys makes the most sense to you?
No, I am not. Pass. I considered Kyler Murray for a moment in what should be a shootout against Tennessee. Titans went over in plenty of those home games, well over in a lot of them. So if I took one, it would be Murray. But then you look at his splits. He averaged 10 DraftKings points less per game on the road last season. 30 at home, 20 on the road. So I'm going to pass there in the season opener. I just think there's too many good spots to pay down. We have a surprise Week 1 rookie quarterback, which we're going to talk about soon, who is extremely cheap. You can go down to 6,500, get exposure to the other side of that game, the home quarterback in Ryan Tannehill, $100 less. You can get Jalen Hurts, who's going to run the ball a lot. Sam Darnold, $5,000, revenge narrative going against a Jets secondary that nobody's in. I think there's just too much value to justify paying up for these guys, especially in Week 1.
Gary, do you agree you're not trying to go over 7K here?
I don't agree, actually. I think a lot of people are going to look in 2 of the spots that Jules just mentioned. Jalen Hurts is probably going to be the chalkiest quarterback on this slate. I think Kyler Murray's in a fantastic spot. Julian mentioned his home-road splits. That's not the split you want to be looking at with Kyler Murray. What you want to be looking at with Kyler Murray is, when was Kyler Murray healthy? That AC joint sprain that completely derailed his season, not just from a passing perspective, but also he was a much more tentative runner after that shoulder issue. The first 10 weeks of the season, Kyler Murray averaged 0.78 DraftKings fantasy points per dropback. That was by far the most in the NFL. He also had a low of 24.1 DraftKings points in that first 10-week span. When this guy's healthy, he is an absolute monster on DraftKings. And like Julian said, this is the second highest projected total game on the slate. It could even be higher than that because the Titans tend to not play defense very well, particularly in Tennessee. So I think this is a shootout. I think Kyler Murray is healthy. And this is the exact time you want to use a guy like this, especially if other people are going to be looking to play down.
All right, Reed, what do you think? Are you going with one of those 4 quarterbacks who are over 7K, or do you want to pay down?
Yeah, Julian. Haha. No, nice shirt, though. I like your shirt, Julian. That's the only thing you got going for you.
Thank you.
But no, I'm with Garen here with Kyler Murray. But if not him, I'm going to stick in the NFC West and go with Russ Wilson, right at 7K flat. Look, history doesn't repeat itself, but it definitely rhymes a little bit. And if you look at his Week 1 starts over the last 3 years, Russell Wilson, 2 of those 3 have been away. So we don't worry about the home or away splits. Indy gave up 300-plus passing yards in 5 of their last 6 games. So you want to attack this defense. I don't think it's that scary, this Indianapolis secondary. And if you look at last year, Week 1 for Russ Wilson, 31 of 35, 322, and 4 touchdowns against Atlanta in 2018. I know Julian's going to say that's 3 years ago.
It is.
298 passing yards, 3 touchdowns against Denver, in Denver. So you take a look at Russ Wilson when he has time to prepare. He does pretty good. So give me Russ Wilson, if not Kyler Murray above 7K.
Guys, one notable storyline this year is that a number of rookie and second-year quarterbacks are actually getting a chance to start. So, Jules, I know you want to talk about this, but Garion, we're going to start with you. Is there anyone out of that group that makes sense for Week 1?
I mean, there's a lot of guys in tough matchups in this particular group. You obviously don't really want to use Tua against the Patriots. Even like Justin Herbert's not in an ideal spot. Look, I said Jalen Hurts is the chalk, and he's going to be the chalk at $6,400 against an Atlanta team that was just absolutely putrid against quarterbacks last season. Second most fantasy points per game to that position. Does that mean I'm not going to use Hurts at all? No. I'm a coward. Of course I'm going to get some of the chalk. Jalen Hurts is probably going to be incredible in this game. So I think he's in a fantastic smash spot. But again, this isn't something you consider on an island. You have to acknowledge that his ownership is going to be massive for week one. So if you're looking to take down a milli, Jalen Hurts might not be the answer.
All right, Reed, what do you think?
Yeah, too bad this question, Jesse, wasn't who's in like their 15th year, because I definitely go with Ryan Fitzpatrick. But I digress. Zach Wilson, I mean, at $5,000, priced essentially as a backup quarterback, a guy who shouldn't be starting, he's going to get the start, and he gets a Carolina defense that wasn't great. Gave up 6 rushing touchdowns last year to quarterbacks. Not to say that Zach Wilson's just going to run all over the yard. But that definitely is a plus for this young quarterback. And 2 of their, let's say 2 of their DBs that they're going to be starting are going to be rookies. Their best cornerback in AJ Bouye is not going to be playing for Carolina. So this Carolina defense doesn't scare me. I think Zach Wilson, and we'll talk about some other guys a little bit later in the show, you can pair him up and get a starting quarterback who's going to get all of the run for $5,000.
All right, Jules, is this an area where the quarterback is that you want to pay down for?
Yeah, if you're going to pay $5,000 for Zach Wilson when you can pay $5,000 for Sam Darnold in the same game going against that Jets secondary, then you must be somebody that uses stats from 2018. Here's a guy that was eating Doritos in his dorm room in 2018, so I can't use those stats. But Mac Jones was not supposed to start, and now he's starting, and he's $4,400. There are other starters priced at $5,000, and there's guys that I think are worth playing. I don't think Zach Wilson's going to have an awful week. He should be playing from behind against a below-average secondary. So there is something to that. I just like Darnold much more going against that putrid Jets secondary with that revenge narrative, with his relationship with Robbie Anderson. But we can talk about all that later. We're talking about Mac Jones. I just think, is it going to be difficult against Miami making his first start? Yes, but we've gotten a lot of rave reviews. It was a huge surprise that he won that job outright over Cam Newton, at least right out of the gate. There's some tight ends there that Jones should be able to trust. Maybe they lean a little bit more on the running game, but that's fine. I think at $4,400, you have to at least give it a try in week one.
All right, Reed, is there someone that you're just 100% fading this week, like someone that really stands out to you as a guy you don't want in your lineup?
Yeah, Gary mentioned it earlier, Justin Herbert. I think that when you go up against Washington defense that should be very stout very early, right? They're all healthy. That's going to be tough. I mean, there's 4 guys right below him that I'd rather play over Justin Herbert. He's at that price too, that $6,700. Like we've been talking about, you can go high GPPs, you can go low. Justin Herbert is in that price. And again, guys that are right below him, I'd rather play.
Jules, what do you think? Anyone you're just out of here on?
Yeah, I mean, Herbert honestly was one of the guys that I think I just can't get there. I see some regression coming this season, and I don't see a very good matchup. But honestly, we can just kind of lump the guys on the top of the board together. Like I said, if I play one, and I'm going to make multiple lineups, so I am going to have some Kyler Murray in that game. It's not like he's a fade, but like I probably won't play Mahomes against Cleveland. I might not even play any Josh Allen against Pittsburgh. So I just think the guys at the top of the board in general, even if you do want to pay up a little bit, those high salaries, you don't need them as much in week one, especially at quarterback.
Garion, is there someone you're just totally fading this week?
Yeah, it's Mac Jones. I don't want a single piece of Mac Jones.
You Dolphins homer.
Oh, yeah, because you like Mac Jones because you're not a Patriots fan.
I like him because he's 4,400.
Great, 4,400. He could be 4x value on this slate. You're not winning a milli with 18 DraftKings points from your quarterback. It just doesn't matter sometimes with this value perception at the quarterback position. You need a guy to score 30 DraftKings points if you're going to take down a milli contest. Mac Jones is not going to do that against this Dolphins defense. The strength of this team is its secondary. It's spent more money on the secondary than any other team in all of football. Also, there's this really popular narrative. I'm sure, Julian, you've heard of it. You don't play rookie quarterbacks against Bill Belichick. They always struggle, blabbity, blabbity, blah. Who was helping him design that defense for the last 15 years? Oh, yeah, Brian Flores, the head coach of the Miami Dolphins. Look, I think this game screams like 21-17, something in that territory. There's just not enough points on the table for Mac Jones to make a serious impact. Cool. If you want to win $15 on your $10 investment, play Mac Jones, get 3.5x value. But the Patriots are going to run the ball 60% of the time. This is a low-scoring game. I want no part of this guy.
All right, real quick, guys. It is slate approved pick time. Who is your favorite quarterback play on the week 1 slate? Who we going with, Jules?
I'm going with Sam Darnold. I didn't think I would get here, but I'm getting here. He's $5,000. I've pretty much mentioned it all. Revenge narrative against the Jets. The Jets secondary, they have nobody that's higher than a 5th-round pick, I believe, in that entire secondary. They're not good. Darnold has connections with guys like Robbie Anderson from his days with the Jets. That duo, that stack, is going to catch a bomb touchdown in this game. There are other talented pass catchers on the Carolina Panthers as well. I'm going Sam Darnold here.
All right, Gary, real quick, slate approved pick time.
Just going to go with Kyler Murray. I know Tennessee overhauled their secondary, but I'm not actually sure they made any real improvements there. I think Murray has a huge game.
Slate approved, Reed.
Russ Wilson, not scared of that Indy secondary or defense at all.
All right, thanks, fellas. Coming up, we're going to talk running backs as the Sweat live stream presented by Xfinity continues. Now, if you watch DraftKings regularly, this next face is going to be familiar. Here's Ross Tucker going through some of his week 1 power rankings, starting just inside the top 10.
Number 8, the Seattle Seahawks.
I feel like the Seahawks are sort of stuck in perpetuity is not the right word. They're kind of stuck in neutral, Bri. I don't feel like they're moving forward. I don't feel like they're moving backward. Looks like Dwayne Brown and Quandre Diggs are both going to play. But I feel like the Seahawks are good enough to make the playoffs and win a game, and that's about it. I just don't think that I don't think they're better. I don't think they got better.
Number 7, the LA Rams.
So I do think the Rams got better. Now, the Rams are like paper thin. They have no depth. But they feel like they got a huge upgrade at quarterback. We're about to find out. There's no more built-in excuses for Stafford this year, which is what I like. No built-in excuses about, it's Detroit. Nope. You got everything you want now, Matthew.
Number 6, Baltimore Ravens.
So it's really a bummer. I took, by the way, Lamar Jackson as my quarterback last night in the Fantrax League, the season-long league for Fantasy Feast listeners with Joe and everybody. I took Lamar as my quarterback. You know, they just need to get better at the passing game. Everything else is there. And unfortunately, they just haven't had a whole lot of time to do that. You know, all the receivers have been hurt. Lamar was out. And so they almost feel to me like the Seahawks of the AFC. That's what they are, Bri. I got to write that down. I feel like that's a good line. Like Seahawks and Ravens, where I feel like they're just stuck in neutral. They're not getting better. They're not getting worse. They're still good. They'll be in the mix. But I just don't think that they're going to – I don't think they're good enough to win to get to the Super Bowl. I just don't. Either one of those teams. They did give Mark Andrews, by the way, 4 years, $54 million extension yesterday. Good for him. He's absolutely earned it. He's a stud.
Welcome back to the Sweat live stream presented by Xfinity. Pick powerful performance and get connected to the most reliable network nationwide. So we continue our look at the Week 1 NFL slate as we move over to running backs. And to help us break down the position, our DraftKings contributors Pierce Dietrich and Kenny Ducey and RotoWire's AJ Scholes. So guys, including Pierce, we have 5 options at over 8K on the Week 1 slate, led by Christian McCaffrey at 9,500. So Pierce is running back the position to pay up for in Week 1.
Yeah, it's usually a pretty good spot to pay up for. Alvin Kamara would be the guy that I would look at in this spot. Jameis Winston, there's a lot of question marks surrounding him throughout his entire career. He has had some big, explosive games, but even in those big games, he had some pretty bad stats. And that's with good receivers. He doesn't have good receivers. So how do the Saints keep this game close like they're supposed to? Well, it's got to be Alvin Kamara against Green Bay. Green Bay has a good defense, but they did give up a lot of points to running backs last season, especially through the passing game. I got to believe that KAMARA, a lot cheaper than those other top tier guys, is going to have a big game, and at least from a point per dollar day, have a better performance.
Kenny, 5 options over 8K on the week 1 slate. Are you going to roster one?
Yeah, look, I don't know. I think probably Dalvin Cook. I don't think any spot here is a good pay up spot. I think that you want to play a speculative approach, a wait and see approach with the NFL season, because I think we're going to be in for some surprises with teams potentially resting their big guys in order to preserve them for the longer season. With that said, if you're going to pay up for any position, I agree with Pierce. I would pay up at running back. And I think it's going to be Dalvin Cook here. Just the most sure bet to me, either him or Derrick Henry. I know the Cardinals have had some success on defense, but those are 2 pretty good matchups that I'm looking at. I think that Carolina probably throws a little bit more against the Jets, attack that bad secondary. And I'm a little scared of Alvin Kamara because I'm not sure how much Taysom Hill we're going to see. Of course, if we see Taysom Hill, that means probably bad news for people who drafted Alvin Kamara.
All right, AJ, how do you feel about paying up at running back?
I think you got to do it this week. I think it's absolutely the spot. I think there's plenty of cheaper options on the board in terms of QBs that could have really good production in the early week here. So for me, I'm with Kenny on this one. I think Dalvin Cook rather is the guy here. I think his production will be similar to what you might expect out of Christian McCaffrey, but he's $400 cheaper, right? So you can get some other options in there. And so if you're going to go for 2 guys that are on what I think is about the same level in terms of what you can expect out of production, you might as well grab those savings and go with Dalvin Cook in week 1.
All right, so AJ, if you're not going to pay all the way up, who's like another solid week 1 option?
Absolutely. Looking under the 7K spot here, I think James Robinson is almost a lock going up against this, disastrous Texans defense. He should see the bulk of the carries. Could even be get some targets in the passing game as well. If you really want to go further down the list and not even pay up that much, you could look at Damian Harris for New England at just 5,200. Again, this is another guy that should see the bulk of the carries. We expect to get more touches with Mac Jones under center. So either one of those guys. But for me, I think James Robinson going up against Houston is nearly a lock for DFS lineups this week.
Pierce, do you have another solid week 1 option that isn't too pricey here?
Joe Mixon will save you some money. He's an intriguing DFS player. He's let people down in the past. But, the Bengals offensive line, I guess, couldn't get any worse. So there's an improvement there. And Joe Burrow is probably going to relieve some of the pressure in the box, maybe possibly open up some lanes because teams are going to now have to honor the passing game with the Bengals. And Minnesota struggled against the run last year. I understand a lot of that was because they had injuries and they had some players opt out, so they will improve some, but how much will they really improve? And this game looks like it's going to be close. It's supposed to be a close game. And even if the Bengals do get stomped, as the Bengals sometimes tend to do, he's a 3rd down running back. We're going to see some P. Ryan, but there's no Giovanni Bernard. He's going to get a lot of snaps. The PPR in a blowout can get you there. Also, if it's a close game, I've got to imagine Joe Mixon is a big part of that. So there's a lot of scripts that work for Joe Mixon in this one.
All right, Kenny, if you're not paying all the way up, who are you going with?
Yeah, it's going to be a little bit of a surprise because I think that people in season-long drafts targeted Chase Edmonds, but my pick here is James Conner. He's up in a great matchup against Tennessee, down the middle of the NFL in defensive DVOA against the run. And you also, look at the amount of fantasy points that they allowed to the running back position last year. James Conner, I think, is a very good pick here. I think that he is going to be the guy to lead this Cardinals backfield as the every down back. We've seen it in years past with Chase Edmonds, someone near and dear to my heart as a fellow Fordham Ram. For whatever reason, Cliff Kingsbury doesn't want to use Chase Edmonds every down. He wants to use him on passing downs. He wants to mix him in as a change of pace back, although he's very talented. So I think that the Cardinals will land on James Conner as their 1st down, 2nd down back. I think this is a game where it'll be, a slow pace. I think that we'll see a lot of running in this game, and I think that it'll be very close. So I think that James Conner at $4,500 is a very, very good bargain here for the amount of volume that you'll get from him.
Who are you totally avoiding to start the season, AJ?
For me, it's Jonathan Taylor in week 1 here. The matchup with the Seahawks, I think the defense can stand up pretty well here. And obviously paying up for that price range to get him all the way up there. There's a couple other guys that I like. Pierce and Kenny both offered other options in that top price range. And so I just think Jonathan Taylor is a fade this week. I'd rather go up for Dalvin Cook, Christian McCaffrey. If you want a guy for week 2 that's worth paying up for, then I think maybe Jonathan Taylor. But week 1, the matchup just is having me fade him.
All right, what do we think, Pierce?
Austin Ekeler is going to be a no for me. Washington's defense is for real. They only gave up the 6 fewest points to receiving running backs, and that's really where Ekeler does his damage. We know he doesn't do the damage near the goal line. Inside the 5, just 2 carries last year. Inside the 10, just 10 carries. And I know people that draft Austin Ekeler in season long or whatever are expecting, well, he's going to be better. He's going to improve. That's not the case. Mike Florio reported that he's not going to be the goal line running back. That's going to be Kelly. That's going to be Roundtree. If he's not getting carries in the goal line area, he's not getting touchdowns. I just don't see him getting points this weekend.
Kenny, who are you totally avoiding to start the season?
He's not a very expensive guy, but Najee Harris at $6,300 is a little too much money for me to pay for a rookie running back. It's a tale as old as time. We trust these rookies too early. I don't think that's going to be an immediate fit there in Pittsburgh. It's going to take a little time to work him into the lineup. You look at a quiet preseason for Najee Harris, and also the fact that this is a team that threw more than anybody last year. And obviously with the guy that's like 55 years old at quarterback, or however old Ben Roethlisberger is now, there is no, there's probably going to be a little bit of a dip in that number. They might run a little bit more. And I do love maybe Najee Harris in a season-long league, but in week 1, especially in a matchup with the Bills, a good front line, a game that they might be losing in the second half, I just don't think it really makes sense to roster Najee Harris at this price. It's not a very good one. And then Saquon Barkley, don't even have to talk about the fact that you don't want to roster him at $7,800. Guy's hurt. Guys that are going to play 5 games this year. Don't draft him either.
All right, Pierce, hit me with your slate-approved pick. That is your favorite running back play on the week 1 slate.
It's got to be Christian McCaffrey. If you've got the money, you take Christian McCaffrey in this matchup. You're going to see the quintessential Christian McCaffrey game. They're supposed to win this game. It can't be because of Sam Darnold. It can't be a revenge narrative. If they win, it's going to be McCaffrey moving the ball up and down the field against the Jets defense. And I know Kenny and his Jets think their defense has improved, but just because young players are 1 year older doesn't mean they're any better. I think this is the 28th run DVOA last year. They added some players, but everybody adds players. McCaffrey should have a big game.
Kenny and the Jets. Kenny, what's your favorite running back play on the week 1 slate?
Yeah, you got that backwards, Pierce. They actually were 8th in rush DVOA, 28th against the pass. I think the way to attack the Jets is through the air. I don't know if you want to target a running back against them, but McCaffrey is probably the most talented back in the league. I'm going to go a little cheaper. I'm going to take Nick Chubb at $7,200 against Kansas City, who, speaking of their rush DVOA, they are 31st, or they were 31st last year. A team that does not defend the rush very well. You look at Nick Chubb, the volume, even though you have Kareem Hunt there, still very, very good, a very consistent option last year. A very cheap price to pay on a guy that's in a great matchup, one of the beasts of fantasy last year. Give me Nick Chubb all day.
AJ, what's your favorite running back play on the week 1 slate?
Well, once Trevor Lawrence gives the Jags like a 14, 21-point lead, they're just going to hand the ball to Robinson for the next 3 quarters of that game, because Houston is just going to be so bad this year. I can't continue to harp on that enough. So Robinson, absolutely the guy I'm most excited for in week 1. You're talking $6,400, not breaking the bank, and can fit in some other guys here. I just can't see how you get away from him.
All right, thanks, guys. In just a minute, we're going to fill you in on the pricing for wide receivers this week as the Sweat live stream presented by Xfinity continues. But before we get there, here's a clip from our Unreasonable Odds podcast as old friend Adam Levitan joined the guys to discuss DFS strategies for week 1.
But going into this week 1 slate, I guess we used to have an article called Levitan's Leverage that was featured on the DraftKings playbook. Any notes that you want to bring up for the week 1 slate?
Yeah, I mean, I would encourage people to think of it as you need to understand you're going to need an incredible amount of points to win in week 1, because we have these outrageous values, like Julian said. So much has happened in the last 6 weeks, and there's no way the salaries can account for it. And they already made the salaries, kind of soft, because they're, quite frankly, there's going to be a lot of casual people playing, and they don't want them to have to jam in like the 4th wide receiver on the Vikings and stuff like that, because that's not fun for anyone. And so, yeah, I would think, just because your team looks really good, like everybody else's team is going to look really, really
Right. Yes.
good also. And so I'd be really careful there. You know, I think the Bengals pass catchers stood out to me as underpriced. I think the Marquez Callaway stuff is interesting. You know, he obviously came from nowhere. I believe he's 3,400 in week 1. I like Jerry Jeudy a lot. Like there's just going to be a lot of pass catchers and so that are underpriced. And so like the way that I would prefer to build would be to take the safety of, you know, Christian McCaffrey is priced appropriately, but you can still take the safety of Christian McCaffrey and you can still take the safety of whatever other really high floor, high ceiling running back you like, DALVIN or whoever else you like, and still fit in some outrageous wide receivers that have really high upside. And so, yeah, I mean, there's going to be some ridiculous teams out there. It would not shock me if you needed like 240, 250 DraftKings points to win tournaments in week 1.
Yeah, Julie and I were even talking about that Bengals stack. Like you take Burrow, Chase, and Boyd, like you have nobody more expensive than 5,700, which is Burrow. Chase is 4,800, Tyler Boyd 5,200. Like if you wanted to do that 3-man stack, so unbelievably incredibly cheap, but with so much time to look at this, like it's not going to be like a surprise. People aren't going to be like, oh, I didn't even realize how cheap that stack was. Like that probably is going to end up being one of the more popular stacks. But like you mentioned, like the salary is soft. Like that's how it is for the first couple of weeks here. But like just looking at some of the value on here, there's so many different directions that you can go in week 1.
Welcome back to the Sweat live stream presented by Xfinity. Pick powerful performance and get connected to the most reliable network nationwide. So we've covered the quarterbacks and running backs for week 1, but let's start looking at the pass catchers. And here to help us out are DraftKings contributors Jeff Ulrich, Matt Meiselman, and Reed Fowler. Now, Jeff, there are just so many options at wide receiver when you look up and down the board for the week 1 slate, and that includes the very top of the board with 9 wide receivers, all at 7K or higher. So who's your favorite play out of this high-priced group?
Yeah, when you look at this group, obviously it just feels like any one of these guys could go off for 30-plus points, especially in week 1. But for me, Jesse, my favorite play is going to be Calvin Ridley at just under 8K, 7,900. It's a player who was 7th in targets last year. Averaged just under 10 targets per game. And now you've got Julio Jones leaving the situation. You just feel like Calvin Ridley, the targets are just going to be an absolute explosion this year, just from that perspective. But you also have a team in Atlanta and Philly in this matchup in week 1 where they're both top 10 in terms of pace of play last year. Philly, in terms of corners, their highest rated corner in Pro Football Focus was Stevie Nelson at 36. This is not a deep cornerback crew at all. If anyone gets hurt in game, this could just be an absolute drubbing. So for me, the matchup, when you take everything into consideration, it's Calvin Ridley here. I think this going up against this Eagles secondary, it's going to be a real good week 1 for him.
All right, Matt, what do you think? Plenty of guys to choose from. 9 wide receivers, all at 7K or higher. Who's your favorite play?
So I'm actually going to pick the same player, and I think the reason that I like him is a bit different, though. It's a lot of it is because the Falcons should have some popular players across the board at a bunch of positions. Mike Davis could be a pretty common spend down option at running back, and then you have Kyle Pitts at tight end. So I think there's a bit of leverage with Ridley where he would negatively correlate with those other guys on his team. And if the ball is just being funneled to Ridley throughout the game, which could happen just because of how good he is, maybe he's open, Pitts doesn't get as involved. And if you don't play Kyle Pitts in your lineup, I think Ridley is a way to have some more security that like there's actually a reasonable path to Kyle Pitts not doing well. Not to say that this isn't a full team stack that can't do well, but I think playing Ridley instead of Kyle Pitts, and also in a spot where a lot of the field will probably have cheaper wide receivers, I think paying up in general makes a lot of sense. So there's a lot of good choices here, but I do think Ridley, for that reason, might be a bit better of a choice than some of the other guys at the high end of the salary range.
Reed, which high-priced wide receiver are you going with?
Yeah, I'm going to do a little bit of a Jeff Ulrich here and mention a few guys, but only hone in on one. I think the Tennessee receivers are viable, absolutely. I think you can pay down for Julio. I think when you talk about both of these guys in that high-powered matchup, it's going to be nice. I think Justin Jefferson also, too, is someone that you can definitely take a look at. But give me DK Metcalf. I talked about Russ Wilson earlier. I love DK Metcalf in this spot. If you look at the games that Russ Wilson threw for over 300 yards, Jesse, and it was weird. Weeks 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9 were those first 5. So all odd weeks. he scored over 20 DK fantasy points on average. And one of those weeks was against Arizona, where he only put up 4.9 DK fantasy points. This guy's an absolute monster. When Russ Wilson has a plus matchup, he looks at DK Metcalf. Tyler Lockett is fine, but give me the touchdown upside with a guy like DK Metcalf. I think they get started very early.
Well, guys, a lot of the fun of NFL DFS is finding the right stacks. So do you have a favorite quarterback wide receiver combo for this slate, Matt?
Yeah, I think I'm going with Ryan Fitzpatrick and Terry McLaurin. And part of why I like it is it's a similar reason to what I mentioned with Ridley. Antonio Gibson, I think, could be one of the chalk running backs. So if you're looking for a way to differentiate from the field, you play the passing game instead of the running game with this team. But I just think the mid-range salary-wise for receivers kind of gets overlooked. There's some way underpriced guys in the 4,000s, and then there's obviously some elite options in the 7,000s and 8,000s. And McLaurin is in that no man's land at 6,400, where I just don't think that any receiver in that range gets a lot of attention. But McLaurin is just really good, and I think a lot of what happened last year, where he was great at the beginning of the season, is he just wasn't healthy down the stretch of the regular season, and he should be fully ready to go. It's week 1. Theoretically, everyone's healthy. So I like that game stack a lot, and particularly Fitzpatrick and McLaurin.
Reed, what about you? Do you have a favorite quarterback wide receiver combo?
Yeah, future Hall of Famer Ryan Fitzpatrick, right, Jeff? No, I don't know if he's going to be in the Hall of Fame, but
after this year, after the Super Bowl, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I love McLaurin. I love that call. Matt's been talking about McLaurin for like 4 months already about how good of a matchup. He's my second best in terms of that matchup on this slate. I think Brandon Ayuk and Jimmy Garoppolo, no one's going to be playing Jimmy Garoppolo, so I think that's there. But I'm going to go back to my Zach Wilson call and pair him up with Elijah Moore at $8,000 total for GPP. I get this, and Garrett kind of mentioned it earlier. You're going to need a lot of points to take on GPP, and this might be some leverage where you can get to that point against Carolina. Jamison Crowder is still unknown, right, in terms of his status. So if he is out, look at Elijah Moore to get a lot of reps in the slot and maybe even on the outside. And again, this Carolina defense is not great. So I love Wilson and Elijah Moore at only $8,000. You can pay up at tight end. You can pay up at running back if you have these two guys and stack them together.
Jeff, what's your favorite QB wide receiver stack?
Yeah, I do think there's going to be a lot of high-priced stacks that are going to go underowned here, like Tyreek Hill, Mahomes, Kyler Murray, DeAndre Hopkins. But I'm going to go a little bit cheaper. Another stack, I still think this stack is going to be underowned. It's Jalen Hurts and DeVonte Smith. I don't know why people aren't excited about Jalen Hurts in week 1. Again, we mentioned Atlanta, one of the faster-paced teams in the NFL. It's a great matchup. They were 5th last in yards per attempt last year. And it just feels like people just kind of just forgotten about what Jalen Hurts did as a quarterback last season. And a lot of it was with the legs, but let's remember, this dude also didn't really have a true number 1 receiver. Now you've got DeVonte Smith. Nobody's hyped about him because he missed most of the preseason. By all accounts, he's practiced the last couple of weeks. He's fully healthy. He's $4,500, Jesse, going up against the Atlanta Falcons, who, again, not a good defense, don't have a good pass rush. I think for a combo of upside and potential, again, we're talking about an Eagles team. Defensively, they're not going to be stopping the Atlanta offense. This is a game that you should see fast-paced, lots of offensive and red zone opportunities. I absolutely love this stack. Love Jalen Hurts week 1, and you got to go with the rookie, the Slim Reaper at $4,500. Way too cheap.
Ooh, all right, Reed, where's the value at wide receiver for opening weekend?
How about a guy that no one wants to play, Jesse? Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase under $5,000. I believe he's at $4,800. Look, how many drops did he have? I think, if you look at Twitter, he had like 1,000 drops in the preseason, right? And that doesn't scare me at all. You look at this guy, he's one of the top draft picks in the NFL draft this season. And let's remember, he didn't play competitive football last season in his final year in college. And so it's taking him some time to get ready. And I know there's a lot of mouths to feed in that Cincinnati passing offense, but I'm not scared of this Minnesota defense. Patrick Peterson, gave up 600 passing yards, which is his first time in like 8 or 9 years that he's done this, or since 2014. So 7 or 8 years, my math's correct. And I'm not scared of Breland as well. And this game should be high scoring. The Minnesota team, like I mentioned, Justin Jefferson and this Minnesota passing offense should do well as well. So I love Jamar Chase at $4,800. I don't think anybody's going to be paying down for him at all.
Jeff, talk to me about some value.
Yeah, I mean, look, I already mentioned one. I think the range, you can find value at any range in DFS. There's guys who can be 7K and value, but I really feel like for week 1, the sub 5K guys, like Reed mentioned already, you're going to find some real value because a lot of these guys were undervalued. We didn't know their role, and now their roles have grown. And Michael Pittman at 4,100 is a great example. We knew he was probably going to be growing into a bit of a bigger role with Indy as the season grew on. You know, obviously he's a top, a fairly high draft pick from last year, had a nice end to the year, but now no T.Y. Hilton. You look at the Indianapolis Colts depth chart, they don't really have a true pass catching tight end. Where are the targets going except to Michael Pittman, who does profile as a number one wide receiver? Again, 4,100. I'm not sure why people aren't trusting this more, to be honest. This is a guy who, again, was a pretty high draft pick. People are all high on the Carson Wentz move. Well, he's got to throw the ball to someone. I expect Michael Pittman to perhaps, project for 7+ targets here in week 1 against Seattle, who, is the favorite right now. So you're probably going to see some good passing downs, just passing situations by the Colts late in this game. I think Michael Pittman at 4,100 is one of the best values on the board, along with DeVonte Smith, who I already mentioned.
All right, Matt, where are you looking for value at the wide receiver position?
The full answer is that I'm really trying to avoid value at receiver in general. Like, I think that the way to be different from the field is to be a little more expensive with your receivers and play cheaper running backs, because guys like Marquez Callaway, Marvin Jones Jr., and T. Higgins they just figure to be really chalky on this slate because all three are underpriced. So Reed and Jeff already mentioned other guys that aren't those players, and I think you can play cheaper receivers that just aren't them. These are just, I think, highly touted picks for a long time. I mean, we get this for week 1 sometimes where there's just so much build up to the season and everyone ends up playing a lot of the same guys. So I don't really have a favorite that's in this price range that I would call the value, but I do think, well, Reed alluded to it a little bit, this Niners game, and then maybe on the other side you play Tyrell Williams, who's cheap. I just think, like, no one's playing Jared Goff, and I think you could get a cheap stack there, but maybe a little safer you play the Niners side. But there are cheap receivers on both sides of that game. Maybe Deebo Samuel, too, is a little more expensive. But I do like that game for quote-unquote value. I just think it's important to mention that going all the way down to the 3,000s and 4,000s could put you on to a lot of the same players that everyone else has.
All right, Jeff, it is slate-approved pick time. Who is your favorite wide receiver play on the week 1 slate?
I think it's really close between Calvin Ridley and John J. Hopkins this week, but I already mentioned Ridley, and that's definitely going to be my pick. I think the matchup is just slightly better. And again, there's just no competition for targets. I know Kyle Pitts is there, but I don't expect him to take all those Julio targets. So for me, with the matchup with Philly, it's Calvin Ridley for week 1.
All right, Matt, who you going with?
Yeah, I'll just go right back to McLaurin. I think it's just a matter of this pricing where you have receivers in the 4,000s and then you have other receivers in the 7,000s. And I think that's where the ownership goes on both of those ends of the spectrum. So Terry McLaurin, 6,400 with, I guess he's a stud, Ryan Fitzpatrick. I think he's good enough, though, to get McLaurin the ball. And McLaurin is just potentially a great receiver who didn't have quarterback play that really supported him at all last year. And I think with a semi-competent guy in Fitzpatrick this year, he could produce a lot better than he has.
Reed, slate-approved wide receiver for week 1.
Yeah, just stay healthy, Fitzpatrick, please, so McLaurin can eat. It's DK Metcalf for me. I think he's a fine play at 7,500. On GPPs, I also like Brandon Ayuk. If he doesn't go too far, too heavily owned, and if he's healthy week 1, I think against Detroit or anybody against Detroit is going to be nice. So give me Brandon Ayuk too. If a lot of people go on Raheem Mostert.
All right, thanks, guys. We have all the top skill positions covered, but we can't forget about the importance of tight ends and DSTs in your week 1 lineup, so we're going to get into that next. But first, here's DK contributor Pat Mayo talking with guest Jake Seeley about some interesting middle-of-the-pack wide receiver options in week 1, including the Giants' Kenny Golladay.
I'm legitimately more concerned about Golladay than I am Shark, but I don't really want to start either one of them if I can avoid it. Like, I would go Waddle over both of them, as crazy as that might sound.
You would go who?
Jalen Waddle.
Oh, you go Waddle over them? Over both of them? I mean, you can convince me on anything
like
with these. I really don't want to play Golladay. Chark, I was kind of wishy-washy on just because I like him. But for week 1, maybe you're right. Like, would you go Cole Beasley, the Bees, or would you go Shark?
I know everybody hates Beasley because
you know what?
Right
listen. You can hate Cole Beasley as much as you want. This is fantasy football. You should start who you think is better on your team. Swear to God.
No, and that was going to be my point. Cole Beasley has done nothing, but he's been your guy for the longest time. Pat deserves all the credit in the world. He had never given up. He was always the biggest fan of Cole Beasley in fantasy, and all he's done is produce for you, Pat. And all he is going to continue to do is produce as the number 2 wide receiver for Josh Allen, whether it's not Emmanuel Sanders or Gabriel Davis as the number 3. Cole Beasley is Cole Beasley is Cole Beasley. I would go Cole Beasley over both of them just on a confidence level.
Would you go with Jamison Crowder?
That's where I probably have the breaker point, because Crowder's also dealing with that hamstring or whatever he's got going on, and who ever knows if he's ever 100% any given game. I will make a case for one guy even behind all of these that we haven't gotten to yet that I would start over, maybe not Shark, but I would probably start over Galladay.
All right, well, hit me with it. I moved Shark down to 50 and Galladay to 51. You've properly convinced me I'd start the Dolphins guys over that. I think you made a very good case for them and the Bees. I have the Bees ahead of them as well, so they're just behind him. But who is the... If you say Henry Ruggs, you might have to throw in the towel on him at some point.
No, I do think Henry Ruggs is in a nice situation this year, but not week 1.
But week 1, week 1's kind of tough for old Ruggs.
Yeah. Despite the matchup, Darnell Mooney, even with Andy Dalton, I would have higher. I would definitely start him in front of Jamison Crowder, no question about it.
Oh, no. If Crowder is healthy, it's going to be Boku catches for him.
Yeah, I'm going Darnell Mooney. But the one I'm going to go back up there from there is he's healthy right now, and that's all that matters. The Gazelle is healthy. And you want to talk about 25% of the target share, because TJ Hawkinson can only cap out at so much before the rest is going to Tyrell Williams. And then whatever's going on in that backfield. And sure, St. Brown wasn't even running with the ones. He was on the 3rd team until recently, until they made some of their cuts. Quintus Cephas was in front of him. Even so, St. Brown is a slot option. He's healthy right now. It might only last 1 week before he pulls another soft tissue injury. But Tyrell Williams, I would start... I'm telling you, it's a toss-up for me with Galladay. Galladay against Denver, not playing at all, with how terrible Daniel Jones has looked and how terrible that offensive line still looks. I'm just, screw it. If it's my lineup, I'm starting Tyrell Williams over Kenny Galladay.
I'm not, and here's why. And why I have St. Brown above Tyrell Williams by 1 spot, even if he's not in on every series or every formation, is I really respect this fully healthy Niners defense. And it might be a target share issue, but I think that the easiest completions on the field for Jared Goff the offensive line for the Lions is actually quite good, but I just think that that pocket is going to be crumbling with the heat that they're going to bring and how solid they are on the outside at corner, that the middle of the field is where the majority of these completions are going to be made. And that leads me towards St. Brown. That leads me towards Hawkinson or Williams and Swift out of the backfield. I think it's going to be tough treading for Cephas and Tyrell Williams in this specific matchup.
Welcome back to the Sweat live stream presented by Xfinity. Pit powerful performance and get connected to the most reliable network nationwide. So this is our final block, and we're going to double up and talk about the tight end and DST options available this week. So to help us wrap up the show, we bring back DraftKings contributors Jeff Ulrich, Julian Edlow, and Pierce Dietrich. So let's get right into it. Jeff, what's your favorite tight end play this week?
Well, let's go big, Jesse, or let's go really, really cheap. Dan Arnold at 2,600 of the Carolina Panthers. By all accounts, this dude has won the starting, pass catching receiving role. Ian Thomas never really flashed anything much over in Carolina. And I like Dan Arnold. He is a converted wide receiver. He's a guy who showed up in the red zone a lot of times for Arizona last year and at times in New Orleans as well. This guy does have the talent. And you look at who he's connected with, Sam Darnold. Darnold really just has never had the arm to go to the outside much. He is a guy who I could see relying on Dan Arnold. Look, this is also a matchup play. It's the Jets. They were terrible against covering tight ends last season. I think this is a good play at 2,600. If you get an Arnold touchdown, you're absolutely in the cash here. And even if you just get 5 targets, that might be enough too. It's all about the price here, Jesse. He's $100 above the min. Going cheap, go with Arnold.
Going with the Darnold stack. All right, Jules, where are you going?
Yeah, tight end was pretty gross last season, and if you need any proof that we didn't upgrade much, we just started off by going with Dan Arnold as our tight end to start the segment. So, it hasn't improved. Everybody would love to play Travis Kelce. Most of us probably won't get there, although we just talked about expensive receivers. I think maybe pivoting off to a guy like Kelsey and just playing more cheap receivers, not the worst idea in the world. Honestly, I'll probably just eat the chalk here with Kyle Pitts. I think it is so bad that I'll take high ownership here in a guy in an offense with no, like I think it was Jeff said, he's not going to just take Julio Jones's role in this offense. But Julio is gone, and Ridley will attract, some attention now as the lone wide receiver one. There's no 1A, 1B anymore. So I just think it's so bad that rather than go down and look for one of those guys that might break through, and it's great if you hit on a guy like Dan Arnold, I'll eat chalk here with Kyle Pitts, play it safe at 4,400. He's just way too underpriced for the beast that he is, the number 4 overall pick, and be different in other places.
All right, Pierce, where are we going? Favorite tight end play this week?
It's Kyle Pitts, and Julian and Jeff have alluded to the process this weekend. It's the 3 Ps. You can pay up, you can punt, or it's Pitts. And punting is ugly, and if you pay up, then you're going to hinder yourself at other positions. It's going to be tough to get a receiver or a running back. And so Pitts fits in really nicely. And this could be, groupthink on all the DFS podcasts of talking him up for 2 months, the top draft pick. The position's pretty good. He's facing a Philadelphia team that allowed it ranks 22nd against tight ends, 26th in DVOA last season. Everything could go wrong. It's tight end, but he's just too cheap. You eat the chalk and you go along with it.
All right, Jules, how about your favorite DST play this week? Where are you going to go here?
Yeah, you never want to pay too much for a defense on the road in week 1, but I'm kind of going to be in that range. I'm going to go with the Denver Broncos here at the New York Giants. The Giants in preseason, that offensive line, I know it's preseason, that offensive line still is not good. It doesn't get fixed. And the Broncos defense had a bit of a down year. Huge piece, obviously missing in Von Miller that comes back. You have Chubb. I just think that front 7 for Denver is going to have no issue teeing off on a quarterback like Daniel Jones with that offensive line in front of him. And we've seen Danny Dimes make plenty of mistakes in his young career. I think we get more of those on top of some sacks. Maybe we even get a touchdown. I'm paying a little bit too much for a road defense, but looking at the rest of the board, I'll gladly do so.
All right, Pierce, what do we think? Favorite DST play this week?
The Buffalo Bills are supposed to win this game relatively easily, and we saw the Steelers struggle against good teams last season, and the Steelers will also be on the road. Steelers have a new offensive system that they're going to bring out. Their offensive line still has plenty of issues. Harris, he's a talked-up rookie running back, but he still is just a rookie running back. A lot of question marks on that side of the ball. The Bills are pretty affordable. I think they're going to be one of the more popular defenses on the weekend.
All right, Jeff, what's your favorite DST play in week 1?
I mean, look, if you can get up to the Broncos, absolutely. I think that's the pay-up spot. I don't think Seattle's bad in that spot either, but the Broncos are definitely the team I'd rather pay up for. I like going cheap. I'm like Pierce. I don't think the Bills are a bad call, but I'm even going a little bit cheaper with the Jets. And I know it's a road team, but again, you get 2 bad teams here, and these turnovers just tend to happen. And you look at what we're going up against, it's Sam Darnold. I mean, there's just no threat here of like him dropping 30 points on this Jets defense. The Jets are healthy. They don't have good corners. We know that. But again, are they really going up against the cornerback who can take advantage? I don't think they are. They've got CJ Mosley back. They've got a good pass rush. If Kenny was here, we'd probably talk for 5 more minutes about it. But I do think with Robert Saleh there in week 1, this is a good matchup. And at 2,400, they're a little bit too cheap. Again, these sloppy games, they can tend to sometimes bring out really good DST performances. So I know it's a little bit of double speak. I do like Dan Arnold on the other side, but you can come back with a really cheap DST in the Jets too.
Kenny has entered the chat. No, I'm just kidding. All right. Take us home with your favorite overall week 1 play, aka slate approved. Pierce, where are you going?
Kyler Murray, when he was healthy last season, he was an absolute monster. You just can't pass up on the rushing yard floor that he gives you and the touchdowns. He gets plenty of action rushing inside the red zone. He's facing a Tennessee defense that was near the worst in football last season. And even if they improved, I mean, I know they tried to make some improvements, but what's the best case scenario? They went from 30th DVOA to 20th. I'll take Kyler Murray versus the 20th DVOA. Let's imagine their average. I'll take Kyler Murray against an average defense. The reality is they probably haven't improved that much at all, and you're going to get air yards, you're going to get touchdowns through the air and on the ground with Kyler Murray.
Jeff, Slate Approved pick. What is your favorite overall Week 1 play?
I just about went with Kyler Murray, too. It's going to be a fast-paced game between two good offenses. But I'm going to go with the guy who's got profiles similar, and he's $1,200 cheaper. And Jalen Hurts, another fast-paced game, two top teams, top 10 in terms of pace of play. Jalen Hurts, in his last 3 games last season, where he started and finished and didn't get pulled for some guy named Nathan, he averaged over 29 DraftKings fantasy points. This guy was an absolute beast in terms of rushing the ball as well. Will he make a few turnovers? Maybe, but I really feel like this guy is getting undervalued again, and I'm not sure why people aren't excited for him. Again, he's $1,200 cheaper than Kyler, so love the matchup, love the player, and he's my favorite play at quarterback for sure, and just really overall at $6,400.
Jules, Week 1 Slate Approved pick.
I like both those plays. Murray, like I said off the top, maybe a little too expensive for me, but we don't need all this money. Sam Darnold is going to score 30 DraftKings points against the New York Jets at home in Week 1, Jeff. So I'm going to make him my Slate Approved pick, and we're going to use that extra money that we save to just stack him with another Jet, Robbie Anderson, who had double-digit DraftKings points the first 7 games of last season. He started off really strong, 3 of those over 20. This Jets secondary is atrocious, and I think these 2 former Jets are going to carve it up.
All right, Jeff, before you go, any last-minute advice you have for someone jumping into NFL DFS action in Week 1?
Yeah, Week 1 tends to be a little bit different than the rest of the weeks. We don't have as much information. You know, we're kind of a little bit in the dark in terms of how the usage is going to go, how the teams are actually going to deploy their offenses. So if you do have, if you've been studying a team a little bit, or if you're just on a stack, say, that isn't getting talked up as much, or maybe just doesn't project as well as you thought it would be, I would say go with it, because Week 1, we're all a little bit in the dark, and it tends to be one of the more sort of variance-filled weeks of the season. So I don't want to say go with your gut, but again, if you do a little bit of research and you feel like a team or a stack is maybe getting undervalued or overlooked, this is the week to do it, because again, we just don't have as much information as we will say in a couple weeks.
Jules, anything to add?
Yeah, it's pretty well said by Jeff. Honestly, we think we know these things, and then it goes differently, and it's because we just haven't seen enough yet to put anything on a page. So I think my favorite piece of what Jeff said is, if you are trying to kind of talk yourself into something, and you're like, this, it doesn't rate as well in certain models or doesn't project as high. If you like it, go with it, because a lot of these projections aren't going to be on point for Week 1. So whatever you think is going to happen, use that rather than what everybody else is telling you is supposed to happen.
Pierce, anything to add?
Yeah, let me add on. And don't play bad players. With all the value and all the talk that we do, we've talked up a lot of people that really aren't that good. Maybe Sam Darnold falls into that category. But I'll pick on Jameis Winston here.
You guys watch.
Jameis Winston is a perfect example of a bad player that's going to get talked up over the next couple days, and he's going to get played. He doesn't have any receivers. He's never been good. It's okay for a quarterback to be good in college and struggle in the NFL. We can write him off. Now, maybe Kevin King is going to have a terrible game and make Winston look good, but there's plenty of options. You really don't have to reach just because that value play looks shiny and fancy. Just stick to guys that have a track record.
All right, good advice, guys. That is a show. I'm Jessie Coffield. You can catch us live here every day on YouTube and other DraftKings platforms at 11 a.m. Eastern, talking all things fantasy sports. So, guys, good luck in Week 1.